all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG, where innovation meets monetization.
Warning. The following podcast might be too truthful for most liberals. Listener discretion is therefore advised.
Welcome to the Tea Party Power Hour. My name is Mark Galar. We have a very special guest with us today, Mr. Axel Kaiser. He is a Chilean-German lawyer. He is the director of the Friedrich Hayek Chair at the Adolfo Ibáñez University in Santiago, Chile. His opinions have been published in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, Forbes, Newsweek, the Washington Examiner, and the Johns Hopkins University Institute for Applied Economics actually placed him in third among the influencers on economic matters with the greatest global impact in Latin America, Spain, and the United States on Twitter. He is the author of a new book entitled The Street Economist, 15 Economic Lessons Everyone Should Know. Axel, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you.
Yes, thanks for having me.
I read the book last night. I enjoyed it very much, and I have a lot of questions, so I think we should just dive into it.
Of course.
The title of the book, The Street Economist. Let's start by explaining to my listeners what a street economist is.
Well, the problem with economics is that it is reserved for a group of experts debating in the ivory tower. And so many of the terms they use are part of the jargon that only economists understand. And so to most people, economics is something very, strange and even hard to grasp. And that's why I wrote the book, The Street Economist, because my point is that anyone, any citizen, a regular citizen, folk, walking on the street could be a good economist. And the only thing they need to know is some basic principles of economics, like prices, capital, what free trade is all about and things like that, in order for them to understand economics and not be, deceived by politicians, demagogues, and even by economists who propose, nonsensical ideas. So that's why I used the title The Street Economist, because it's in opposition to these ivory tower economists that no one understands.
You know, when I was in college, I had an ivory tower economist that was teaching me basic economics 101. And I still recall one day he said, "Who can give us an example of a product with highly inelastic demand?" And I raised my hand and I said, "Pacemaker batteries?" And he looked at me. He looked at me and said, "There's no need to get morbid, Mr. Galar," and he moved on to the next person. So anyway, he had no sense of humor whatsoever, but I could tell by reading your book that you do. Would it be wrong to say that The Street Economist, your book, is to economics sort of what guerrilla marketing was to marketing, a basic layperson's handbook for economics?
Yes, that's exactly right. I wrote it for the general public, young people, students at universities who know nothing about economics, and also the average person. Many of the buyers of the book are just, regular folks like Uber drivers, delivery guys.
Podcast
and that
host.
Yes, also. So the book has reached out to audiences that were not used to, that people who didn't go to college, for instance. It has been a huge best-selling book among them. The pirate edition is being sold on many, on the streets of Latin America and Spain, and now it has been published in Germany, and it's coming out in Poland. So exactly, I wrote it for the general public, and it's a very short book, no math, no graphs, no footnotes, nothing very academic, so that people don't get discouraged from reading it, because if you have a 500 pages book, then people are not going to read it and are not going to buy it. And if you have a lot of math, it's another barrier. And you can explain economics in simple terms. This is what Frédéric Bastiat, the great French economist of the 19th century, did. And that's my role model. He wrote and explained apparently complex issues in a very simple way, so that the public would not support bad economic policies at the time in France. And he has become a classic, and everyone who knows about Bastiat is fascinated by his work. So I was very much inspired in him, and Henry Hazlitt, who wrote this book, Economics in One Lesson, in 1947. And that also became a best-selling book in the United States. But since then, we didn't have anything, and that's why I wrote this book. And I have discovered that there was huge hunger among younger people, even school students, and the average person to know about economics, and that explains the success of the book, which is unprecedented. We had never seen something like this happening with an economics book in Latin America or Spain. And so I hope that it will have the same success in the U.S., where I think it could make a huge contribution, especially among the younger generation, so they can understand basic principles.
So Bastia had the broken window theory and the candle makers petition, and Kaiser has the rabbit hunter and the salmon fisher.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's the way. Exactly. You have to explain it with the simple examples, because otherwise you go to the aggregates and you go to the abstract thing. And in reality, economics is not something abstract like they want to show you in the textbooks. It's something very concrete. It's just regular people making decisions and exchanging goods and services, and that's what, and investing and things like that. And that's what economics is all about. We are all part of economics, of the economic reality, everyone. And why wouldn't be able to explain it in terms, that everyone can understand? And that's why I love Bastiat and Hazlitt.
Very good. I have to agree with you. I did take 6 hours of economics when I was receiving my business degree from Texas A&M, but I wish I would have had this book as my textbook. I think I would have been. I think I would have been a lot more interested, and I would have understood it better rather than just memorizing answers for a test. So
go
ahead.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, because Deirdre McCloskey, who wrote a blurb recommending the book among other economists, she tells me she studied economics at Harvard. Now she has been a professor for many years, first at Chicago and then Chicago, Illinois. And she tells me that she had a roommate that was reading von Mises' Human Action, which is a longer book on economics. But while she was studying at Harvard, she learned nothing compared to her roommate, who was studying engineering and reading Ludwig von Mises just for fun, right?
Right.
So he learned more about economics than just reading von Mises for fun than she learned studying formal economics at Harvard. And so I think it's a funny anecdote, but it reflects something that is really important. Sometimes the formal degrees don't necessarily prepare you better for an understanding of the world. They have their own logic and not necessarily are taking in or are teaching the best ideas. And my book is very much inspired in this Austrian school of economics that was, developed by Mises and Hayek and Rothbard and all of these people. And I think they have a better grasp of economic reality, and they can also communicate it in more efficient terms for everyone, basically. So yeah, I get what you are saying.
Well, I think also it's important to point out something you said in the book about basically most people are economically ignorant. They don't have a fundamental understanding of economics. And perhaps the way economics has been taught and the way the textbooks have been written is a big part of that. I don't know if you'll recall this, but a couple of leftists held a rally in Washington, D.C., Craig Colbert and I believe it was Jon Stewart, and some conservative college students put up a booth with a big sign that asked the question, is Obama a Keynesian? Well, people were coming by the booth saying, you idiot, he was born in Hawaii. He was born in the United States.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah.
So
that's funny. I didn't know that. That's really funny. But it's it's true. Most people know nothing about economics, and this is not only people who didn't go to university or college. Mostly people who did go to university and college are the most ignorant ones because they are taught the wrong things and or nothing at all. People who go and study history or philosophy or law even, they know nothing about economics. Even some people who study economics don't know nothing about economics. So
it's always,
I hope
I'm sure you're going to do a good job of bridging that gap. Let's dive right into it. One of the things you say in the book is that some people finance their own existence while other people use taxpayers, for example, to finance their existence. I want to throw in another quote. I read once someone said, when we reach the point that there are more people taking from the government than paying in, we will be past a point of no return. Talk to us a little bit about people who finance their own existence versus people who rely on others to do it. And then give me your assessment of the United States right now. Are we to the point where we almost have more people taking than paying in?
Yeah, so the first lesson of economics, and it's very obvious, but we have seemed to have forgotten it, it's that you have to work in order to make a living. Why? Because resources are not just available in nature. It's not like you go into a forest and then you find an iPhone, right? So wealth has to be created. And if you want to survive, you have to work. And so then you have an income and you can feed yourself and your family. So there are two ways of surviving. One is that you work for yourself and your family, and the other one is that someone else works for you. And then you live, out of the fruits of the labor of someone else. And when you have the state and the government intervening, what the state does is to collect taxes from some people in order to give it to other people. That means you are not living from your own efforts, but you are living basically at the expense of someone else who is being coerced into supporting your way of life. And this is what politicians love to do, because they promise that people are going to get things for free, which are never free, because someone else has to pay for them. But they get elected by promising these things that they are not paying out of their own pockets, but as I said, they are using taxpayers' money in order to pay for all that. And in the United States, you have now this situation where 2/3 of the federal budget in the U.S. are what we could call social rights. That's to say, Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, and things like that, that people believe are, inherent, or they have a claim on these things independently of their effort and what they give in exchange. And that is why you now have very high taxes, I would say, in general in the United States, despite the efforts done in the previous administration to lower them. And you have a huge amount of debt. It's not because of military spending, because if you really take a look, military spending as a percentage of the federal budget is low compared to all the other items. And so the U.S. is going down the road of a broken welfare state if they don't do something about this. The debt is too high. I don't think the U.S. is going to be able to pay it back. I think the U.S. has passed the point of no return, because they have bought into this progressive narrative that, went very much against the legacy of the founding fathers and the idea of self-reliance. And once you create this system where the incentives are that more and more people get from government something, less and less people are paying into the government because you get discouraged because you leave or you start working, I don't know, in the informal economy or something. And then you have the politicians promising more and more because it's a contest, and the one who promised more benefits is going to win. And they don't pay the cost because after 4 or 8 years, whatever, they're not in office anymore and they don't care. And they also favor the interest groups that are supporting them. Because it's not only poor people or average people who get benefits from the U.S. government. It's also big corporations who have lobby firms hired that are doing the job every day in Washington, and so they get funds, subsidies, or they are, being protected against competition. So I think it's a huge mess, and the only way to fix it is to go back to understanding basic economic principles and teaching people that they don't have a right on other people's money. And so the government is engaging in a very unethical and immoral activity when it massively redistributes wealth. But that seems like a very hard fight to fight nowadays.
I think a very popular bumper sticker among conservatives is, despite what you've been told, nobody owes you a damned thing. And that's the way conservatives feel, that we all have to pull ourselves up by our own bootstraps, support ourselves, and make our own way. But that's the opposite of what the other side is teaching. Now, getting back into the book, you describe inflation as a hidden tax. Elaborate on that a little bit for us.
Well, yes, actually, inflation is a very simple thing to understand because it has to do with an excess creation of money. So you have more money chasing a similar amount of goods, and therefore prices go up. But they don't go up at the same time. Some people get the money first and are able to spend it first, and so they can buy stuff at pre-inflationary prices. And when the other guys come and try to buy the same stuff, let's say bread or whatever, they find that the prices have gone up, and therefore everything is more expensive. And now, why is inflation created? Basically because government spends too much money, and then they use the printing press in order to fund all this money. And this is what has been happening in everywhere, basically, not only in the United States, but also in Europe, in England, in many Latin American countries. Argentina is a good example. You have over almost 150% inflation a year, and that's 100% government printing money in order to, buy stuff and give people things for free, which in the end are not free. So in the end, what you do with inflation is to have a tax on people because instead of officially raising taxes, which is not very popular, politicians, what they do is to print money and spend it, and so they can, get all these goods and services before the other people can have access to them or buy them, and so the prices rise for the others. That means they can buy less with the same amount of money because a share of these goods and services has already been taken by the government, not via taxation directly, but via inflation, via printing money and spending it before the rest of us. And so, but it's in the end the same logic of taxation. It's a way of confiscating people's income, and even Keynes would argue that inflation was a hidden tax that only few people could really see. So wasn't wrong about everything, but people have to understand that politicians create inflation, and central banks, of course, but central banks are never independent. If we are very honest, they are never independent, and the Fed has not been independent ever really. So that's it. It's I always use the example of someone going to the street having a printing press at home. Like you couldn't tell the difference between the printed bills and the real ones, and then you go to the street and you buy everything you want, and then the next guy who comes with his salary will find all the prices have gone up because someone else has taken away many of these goods and services before and before him, and then that's why you have an inflation. Basically, you are stealing people. That's what you do when you are inflating the currency. It's very easy to understand in the end, but not a lot of people really do grasp why inflation happens. And you have all these narratives saying, "Oh, it's the greedy, business people who are raising the prices and taking advantage." It has nothing to do with inflation. It's the government, it's the politicians stealing people, and taking away the goods and services that they produce. Because if I print money, I don't have to work in order to make a living. I just go with the printed money, and I can claim part of the goods and services that other people produced. And I can go with the bills, I claim that, I take it away, I live out of other people's work without having to produce something myself in order to exchange it by something that these other guys have produced before. And so it's very easy, if you have the printing press, to buy everything you want and then pretend that nothing is happening, nothing wrong is happening. But the other guys, if they don't know about this, if they are not aware, what they will see is prices going up and the share of resources that they can claim in exchange for their own labor going down. It's as simple as that.
My next question for you was going to be, could we consider quantitative easing another hidden tax? But you've done a great job of explaining how printing money or quantitative easing, if you want to use the euphemism, and inflation go hand in hand. But I am going to go to something else in the book that just popped into my head as you were giving this explanation. A lot of people say, why doesn't the government just print money and give everybody $1 million? Now, one of the things you point out in the book is that if the government did that, you really wouldn't be increasing anyone's purchasing power. Explain to my audience why that's true.
Yeah, so imagine that the government would do that and everyone would have $1 million the next day. The one thing that can happen is that everyone is $1 million richer at the same time. Let's say it's an instant act. And so the relative position of everyone would be exactly the same as you had before the $1 million, because imagine you had someone with $100,000, someone with $50,000. So this person will have the $100,000 plus the $1 million, and the other one will have the $50,000 plus the $1 million. So they will be, in comparative terms, exactly the difference between them will be exactly the same. One is $50,000 richer than the other. So now, if you go and everyone spends the money at the same time, prices will go up for everyone at the same rate. And so you will not be better off after the $1 million that you received from the government than you were before, because the purchasing power of everyone else will go up by the same amount. And so that wouldn't work. But that wouldn't work, even if everyone got $1 million. What you would have is prices are going up for everyone at the same rate, and so you couldn't buy many more things than you could buy before the $1 million, And so, but that is not the way inflation really works. Some people get the money first, and these guys who get the money first, they can buy stuff at pre-inflationary prices, and so they are benefited by the money that the government is printing, and the rest are paying the cost of this inflation or this money printing. Because we don't have to forget, in the end, money is nothing else than a medium of exchange. Money is not a good in itself, and so if you're in the desert with money, it doesn't help you. I mean, you need other stuff. You need water. You need food. Money is just a medium of exchange. So if you think about money in those terms, you will realize that in the end, the only thing that counts is the real production that people are able to deliver. And so if I produce something in the market of value to other people, then I can exchange that for what other people have produced. If I don't produce something in the marketplace, and then I can't claim anything because I don't have something to exchange it for. And if I only print the money, then I'm claiming goods and services without having to produce myself, which makes the whole society poorer. And so inflation, in the end, what does produce as a result is an impoverishment of society. Some people benefit, only a few, but as general rule, society gets poorer. Why? Because too many people are claiming, or some groups of people are claiming goods and services without having to produce themselves anything. And that is like, imagine 40% of society would produce and 60% would not produce, and would be able to buy stuff that the 40% produces because the government is giving them printed bills. You would have 60% less people producing in society. Imagine everyone produces exactly the same. That would be 60% less production in society, and you would have only 40% people producing because the government is stepping in and giving people printed money. So the 60% can just come and claim everything that the 40% are producing without giving anything in exchange. And so in practice, this 40% would become sort of slaves to the 60% because they're working for free in the end. But if you had 100% of people producing because no one is getting any printed money, then the stock of wealth in society would dramatically go up and everyone would be better off. This is not to mention the destructive effect that inflation has on the price system and the structure of production and many other things. But just taking a look at the inflationary process, only on the first level of analysis, you can see that the idea of just printing money and giving it to people is nonsensical. If that worked, Argentina would be a paradise of prosperity because they have printed so much money over the last years, and everyone has gotten printed money from the government, and they have 150% inflation, 45% poverty rate, 6 million people are starving in a country that produces food for 400 million people, and it's a complete disaster. So you have to go and work and produce something, otherwise money is completely useless because it's not money what you want, it's what you can buy with money what you really want, and someone has to produce that.
You made a reference earlier to the Federal Reserve. I'd like to ask you two quick questions about the Federal Reserve. First of all, most people believe because the President of the United States appoints the head of the Federal Reserve that the Federal Reserve is essentially a 100% government-owned entity. And from what I understand, it's actually a collection of international banking families that control the Federal Reserve. And in fact, they operate pretty independently of the President of the United States. The other thing is, I talked to someone a long time ago who said that every recession we've had in this country for so many decades has been the result of the Federal Reserve hitting the accelerator on the money supply and then stomping the brakes. Talk to me about both of those things. Who really controls the Federal Reserve? Who really makes up the Federal Reserve? And also, what role has the Federal Reserve had in various recession periods due to their control of the money supply?
Yes, I mean, the Federal Reserve is a private institution that was created by the United States government in 1913, and it started really working in 1914. And it's like a banking cartel. And you're absolutely right. It's not 100% government institution. You could argue that the Federal Reserve is sort of the result of cronyism of the time between the banking elites and the government, that they created this system. And it is controlled by private banks. That's absolutely the case. And they appoint the people in charge of the different branches of the Federal Reserve. And yes, the Federal Reserve Board has a different, to some extent, a different process of election. Where the president is being elected by the United States president, and then I think there is confirmation by the Senate, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember that part exactly, but it is this sort of very spurious arrangement between economic elites and the political class. So it's not like a private company competing in the marketplace. No, that's not the case, because it has privileges and all sorts of powers that have been granted by the government to this group of people. And the president of the Federal Reserve Board is, I think, the most powerful person in the world, because it controls the dollar, which is the reserve currency of the whole world, and they decide whether to raise interest rates, to shrink the money supply, increase it, and so on and so forth. And by doing so, they of course create business cycles that end up in catastrophes like the 2008 financial crisis. That was mainly the product of the Federal Reserve System having low interest rates for too long, and then creating these housing bubbles that then, when inflation started to increase, then they raised rates and the whole system came crashing down. The same case you could make for the Great Depression in the 1920s, 1929, when you had the financial crash, which, by the way, led to the rise of Nazism in Germany. So that's how dangerous these central bankers can be. And you had the Great Depression, and this was caused by the Federal Reserve because they manipulate the interest rates, they manipulate the money supply, they create bubbles, and then you have these disasters, which are not only economical, they're political, they're social, and have effects that last for decades or even centuries. And so I'm very much against the existence of central banks. I think from a theoretical perspective, what they try to do is impossible because no one can really plan prices, and what the central banks are basically planning agencies where they do the same thing that Soviet Russia tried to do, which was to fix prices for everything. Well, they tried to fix the price for money. They tried to determine in a centralized way how the whole monetary system should work. And you don't have knowledge for doing that. And I have had this debate with many central bankers, including some people from the Federal Reserve System. And I asked them all, how do you know what interest rate you should have? Like, how is it you can determine that? Because they can agree with you that the government shouldn't fix the price of tomatoes, for instance. But they can fix the price of money, or credit, which is part of every transaction in the economy. You need money for doing transactions, and they can know that. There is no way they can know that, and no one has come up with a good answer, and that's why they are mistaken all the time. Even if you had the best people at central banks and were completely clean from any influence, by corporations, banks, and the political class, even if you had that, they would be up to an impossible task, which is the task of price fixing. You cannot know what prices things should have for the simple reason that the market economy is a complicated process from where you have billions of interactions every day that determines prices in a spontaneous and non-planned way. So prices are the result of the decisions of billions of people adjusting to different circumstances 24/7, and they vary all the time. And so you cannot know what price should, bread have or whatever, let alone what prices or what interest rates you should charge for, like a loan or something like that. And that's why the system should be dramatically changed. And I'm not the only one saying this, by the way. There are plenty of very well-known economists arguing against the Fed and the existence of central planning in monetary policy. And free banking has been much better than central banking. Historically, when you read, for instance, Larry White's works or George Selgin, and even the Fed, the system was much more unstable and prone to crises after the creation of the Fed than before the creation of the Fed. And they created the Fed with the excuse that the system was too unstable. Well, it turns out that it was much more unstable after the creation of the Fed. So I would get rid of the Fed, for sure.
If you're not a fan of centralized banking, does that mean you are a fan of crypto?
Well, I am a fan of crypto insofar as they provide a technology that, can decentralize the monetary system, can enable you to have different currencies competing with each other, that can provide new technologies that would make it easier for people to participate in the market economy because you would have access to credits, for instance, that are not being processed by the traditional banking system, especially very, microcredits for people of low income. I think, the crypto sphere can offer different, alternatives. I'm not a fan when you have the government saying they want to create CBDCs based on blockchain technology and things like that, because that's a risk. For every new technology we create, you will have politicians trying to use it in order to control our lives even more. And so I'm very worried about the war against cash that is taking place in the world, and the idea that we will have a central bank digital currency where the government will know in real time how you are spending your money, where, when, with whom, and you will have no privacy whatsoever, and then they will be able to program your money so you can, that the government wants you to spend it, and then you will have expiration dates for your money, so you have to spend it within the next 30 days, otherwise you lose your money. All of these things are totalitarian in my view, and there is a reason why China is a leading nation in terms of CBDCs, but now you are here in the United States, many people want to introduce them in Europe and Latin America, everywhere. So it has become a fashion. And I hope that crypto will offer an alternative to that, and that people will resist it, because otherwise we will have our lives completely being controlled by the government. If we lose monetary freedom, which we partially have because we have the Fed, but at least if I have cash and I go and buy something, the Fed doesn't know what I did. But if they get rid of cash, that's it. It's game over.
So all that money that grandma's been hiding in her mattress, she would either have to fess up to and pay back taxes on, or it would become worthless.
Exactly. I mean, they would make it impossible for you to, or illegal to use cash. And you go to Sweden right now, and cash is not being used almost anymore because the businesses wouldn't take it. And so you cannot buy things with cash, and everything it's just electronic money, and so it's very easy to track it and to control it. And they can apply interest rates on you. They can negative interest rates. I mean, expropriate your money. Imagine if government could just say, you have this account at the Fed, which is the way how a central bank digital currency would work probably. And you are saying things that are not politically correct, and you are refusing to go to re-education, like they're trying to do with Jordan Peterson in Canada right now. So we are going to charge you a punishment of 20% of your savings. What can you do there? I mean, we will try to find alternatives like buying gold coins and silver coins and things like that. But still, it would be very hard to avoid, being controlled by the government and sanctioned by the government, and losing your ability to dispose of your. I'm very worried about this because it's a trend that is growing. It's being pushed by central banks all over the world, and I think even the World Economic Forum is promoting this idea, and so it has become like a fashion among elites, even among well-known economists like Harvard professors and others. And so I am very worried. In Chile, for instance, we had this former president of the central bank, who was a very good economist, or at least a very well-known economist, saying that we should get rid of cash, and that so we can control, and this is the excuse they give you, organized crime.
Right.
As if organized crime has not been using the traditional banking institutions for decades already. I mean, it's crazy if you think about it, and it's an excuse because it's not true.
We've gone a little over on time, but I have extra time on the show. Do you have time to answer a couple of more questions?
Yes, of course.
Okay, great. I want to talk to you about the Biden economy and some of the ideas that the left has been floating for a while. And I'm just going to throw the idea out, and I'll let you tell us whether it's a good idea, a bad idea, and why it's a good idea or a bad idea. Biden wants to pay off student loans. I think I know your answer, but go ahead.
Well, that's a horrible idea. We did that in Chile, and we made universities free basically for most people, and all over Latin America you can see the result of this policy. And what you have is poor people paying for rich people's education, which I don't think is fair, and people who go to university as a general than people who don't go to university. And so that's the first thing. Then you create a sclerotic educational system, because once you do that with student loans, the next step is to say, okay, universities are for free right now, from now on. Why? Because it makes no sense to start paying student loans for one generation, not to pay them for the next one. So practically what you will have is free university for everyone. And that creates very wrong incentives. So you will have more bad incentives. You will have more people choosing the wrong career path and studying more things that are not profitable in the market, because they are not really thinking about am I going to pay back the loan once I graduated from school or from university. And so you have a distortion in the human capital market. In the people are not going so much into studying things that are really productive. And then you have the problem that universities can also raise tuitions as much as they want, and which is what you have seen here in the United States because of government involvement, subsidizing students to go to university. And in the end, you have a lowering quality in the universities. You have more and more people staying at universities for longer time, which is what happens in Latin America and even in Europe a lot. And that costs the taxpayers much more than they anticipated. And in the end, it's, as I said, very regressive, because it's poor people or middle-income people paying for the education of the wealthiest people, or people who are going to have a higher income in the future. So from every point of view, is a disastrous policy. It's pure populism, and it will not improve the quality of education. It will damage the quality of higher education. It will not create more opportunities for students. It will destroy opportunities for students. It will not make the students, decide for the better alternatives, available. Many of them go and study humanities and things that are not going to be helpful, and we have seen this. There is evidence for this, because you don't have to do the benefit analysis, cost-benefit analysis, and so on. So I don't know. It's really, I thought there was an agreement on that in the United States, but I'm seeing that they're following the Latin American path, and I can tell you nothing good can come out of that.
You actually beat me to my next question. I was going to ask you what you thought about free college for everyone, but those two go together. So I also want to ask you about, what's being proposed now of charging people with better credit ratings a higher rate of interest on home loans so that they can subsidize people with lower credit ratings who otherwise would pay a higher interest on their home loans. That's something that the left is pushing right now. Why is that a good or bad idea?
Well, this is a collectivist mindset where you, as a productive member of society who are working hard and who has, the right values and the right mindset, have to subsidize people who are not as productive. Maybe they're working hard, maybe not. But what that creates is, of course, you destroy incentives for people to save more money in order to buy things. That has an effect on capital markets. That has an effect on on housing prices and the real estate sector, because if you are directly subsidizing in that way people who have a lower credit scores, then of course you will think twice before asking for a loan, and you will probably not buy the house that you wanted to, because it's going to make it more expensive for you to buy it in the end, because they're taking money away from you in order to pay for your mortgage. And I think if it's an aggressive measure, it would have a huge impact on the housing market. But it is part of this whole narrative that, the U.S. is a society of oppressors and oppressed people, and so minorities have the right to have access to credit and loans in order to buy houses and stuff. And in the end, you create a distortion because they are not going to be able to deliver and to pay. There is a reason why you have interest rates. You assess risk, and you're not doing a favor to someone who is not qualified to take a loan when you give this person the loan. And we saw that during the financial crisis. There was this Community Reinvestment Act that was passed by Carter in 1977, and then it was really, modified in the 1990s in order to make it more aggressive, forcing banks to give credits to minorities, to the so-called ninjas, no income, job, or assets. And this was a huge problem because in the end, the financial crisis was the result of these people not being able to pay back their debts. That's why it was called the subprime crisis, because you had subprime loans, mortgage loans, and things like that, and financial instruments that were at the heart of this apocalypse that we experienced at the time. And this was the result of public policy, of ideas like that. And if you take a look at the amount of minorities, the number and share of credits allocated to minorities, of course it went up. But in the end, what happened was that they were not able to pay, and so the whole system unraveled. The whole idea went into a crisis mode. And Democrats were guilty of this under Clinton, creating the housing bubble, but also Republicans like Bush pushed this agenda, and so different institutions played a role, like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, buying all these mortgages and then selling them as mortgage-backed securities and so on. So the main problem is derivatives. Yeah, exactly. So the main problem, in my view, is not even an economics problem, which is horrible. These ideas are very immoral and unethical. You are discriminating against people because they are productive, because they are, saving, because they are trying to make a living for their families and themselves, and charging them more money. And this has also a racist component, because if you take a look at the people who are saving more and paying back their loans and getting these credits are mostly white Americans and Asians. And what are you trying to do with this? Is the same that the university system has been trying to do for decades, which is to favor, these Latino students or black students, giving them, or demanding much lower scores in order to enter universities. And then you are, of course, leaving the best students, whether white or Asian students, out of the system. And you are discriminating against them just because they don't belong to the appropriate race, the accepted race. And this is the same in the financial system or in the credit system, if you start applying these things. And it's not going to stop there. It's going to go much further. It's like, take a look at California. They have passed so many stupid laws in this state, and they keep on doubling down on these ideas.
Reparations.
Reparations, and then you had the involvement with the school systems, what they're trying to do, and getting rid of standardized tests for also people who go to universities, and strongly favoring lower qualified students that are going into different universities they have at the expense of the other better qualified students who cannot go. And then you have crime running out of control because you can steal up to, I think, $1,000 or something like that, and nothing happens to you, and homeless crisis, and and then you have all these absurd regulations, zoning laws and things like that make it impossible to build anything. And so only 13% of Californians can afford to buy a house, which is a nightmare. No wonder that over 50% want to leave the state, according to many polls. But you would think, okay, now they will learn out of this. No, they double down on all that. So it's like a collective impulse to commit suicide. And even when they see that big companies, corporations from Silicon Valley are also leaving, they continue to raise taxes and come up with ideas like reparations. The electric grid is a disaster in California because they have spent most of the money in green energies that are useless, most to a large extent, but they haven't renewed in some parts the system of transmission of electricity. So it dates back to the 1950s. No wonder they are having these problems with fires every year, because most of these fires are produced by these very old networks that are across lands and countries, and across the countryside, and they are in touch with some trees that are not being taken care of, so that the branches don't go on the cables, and then you have these wildfires. But they don't do that because they prefer to invest in the solar panels that are not really providing energy in sufficient amounts. So everything is the other way around in California, and that's why I say if they get away with this idea of subsidizing minorities, because this is really about that, by punishing people who are saving more and are more productive and responsible even, then they will double down on that. It would just go, be more and more over time, and the effect will be more dramatic. And you have this mindset. You have to get rid of the mindset, because the problem in the end, it's the mindset that is driving this. And it will be, of course, when you don't have achieved enough credit allocated for lower income people, they will come and say, this is because we need even more subsidies for them, because the system is still racist, systemically racist against them. And they will double down. And how you oppose that then? Once you accepted the first step in that direction, you have to accept all the other ones. So it's horrible from every point of view.
It sounds like you're not going to be supporting Gavin Newsom for president.
No, I think I want to tell you something about Gavin Newsom.
Okay. Because
if he becomes president, that is the last nail in the coffin for the United States, I think. I think, Gavin Newsom is the most disastrous politician that the world has seen in decades, with Justin Trudeau, who is a closet tyrant. And Gavin Newsom is more or less the same as Justin Trudeau. And he is so woke and so leftist that I'm completely convinced that if he became president and had the chance to push forward his agenda, it would destroy the what is left from the healthy economic system and institutions in this country. I think he's one of the most dangerous guys that you can have in the White House. Far more dangerous than any Republican or probably any other Democrat.
I agree with you 100%, but like you, I'm also equally amazed that he keeps doubling down, and that a lot of Democrats think he would be an ideal candidate for president of the United States, even though people are leaving his state in droves. I mean, they just can't stand being there. They can't afford to buy a house. Crime is through the roof. It's easily the most woke state in America, and it's a disaster, and yet people continue to push the woke agenda that Gavin Newsom has embraced. This idea is an oldie, and we've kind of covered it a little bit, but it's the idea of raising minimum wage. Axel, is that any different than the previous example we discussed where you just give everyone $1 million even if they don't increase their productivity?
It's no different, and I have a lesson on this about this in the book. Because what determines your income, and this is important to understand, is your productivity. It's not a law. Like we could have a minimum wage law of $1 million per month for everyone. What would be the effect of that? I mean, it wouldn't be LeBron James who ends up unemployed because he makes much more than that. It would be all the other guys who are not productive enough to make it, rational for a firm to hire them. And so, but the same happens if you have a minimum wage law of, $10 per hour or 15 or 20 or whatever. There are people who are below that threshold of productivity, and they are not going to get hired. And even more, you are going to fire people, and you are going to replace the guy who is flipping burgers at McDonald's with the robots. And then these people will be on the streets living on food stamps or who knows what are they going to do. And so in the end, the minimum wage law is a prohibition for lower skilled people to work in a formal labor market. That's it. It's not really saying that the businesses you can't pay less than this. Yes, partly is that, but it's also telling to people, you didn't go to school, you are not qualified, you belong to a minority, talking about racism, and probably you have problems because we know that a lot of the social problems we try to solve affect minorities more than others, like blacks and Latinos, and this is a fact. But these people need the jobs the most. And so if you have the minimum wage law, you are telling them, no, you are not able to work because you are not productive enough to be hired by the company or to be hired by a small business. By the way, small businesses create a lot of jobs, and probably more if you put them all together compared to big companies. So it's a horrible idea. It's extremely, detrimental to the well-being of the poorest in society. And I don't know any economist, anyone, a serious one, who would support minimum wage laws. Not one serious economist would support that. Even, Democrats who know about economics would tell you in private, this is not a good idea.
Last question. Now, a big part of what I see the left doing is just straightforward divisiveness, straightforward class warfare. They have a divide and conquer approach. They want you to begrudge someone who is a huge financial success, the Elon Musks, perhaps to a lesser extent, Bill Gates. One of the things you talk about in the book is why preventing people from becoming wealthy is a bad idea. Could you explain to my listeners why preventing people from becoming extremely wealthy is a bad idea?
Yes, there is a famous quote by a Chinese minister. I don't remember exactly which communist dictator it was in China, but the guy said, because we wanted to prevent a few people from having a Rolls Royce, we condemned everyone to ride a bike. So I think that's a great quote, because what people have to understand is that there is only one way to get wealthy in a market economy, and that's by creating goods and services that people want and need at the prices that people are willing to pay. So you have to benefit and create wealth in order to be a rich guy. If I want to have a store where I sell bread to people, and I have detected a good spot, and then I create a store, and my bread is good, and people are buying it because they need to eat. So I'm benefiting them. They don't have to go to another place and buy bread. This is closer, whatever. They're saving money. The bread is better, has a better quality, and if I'm successful with that store, maybe I will open another one, and then another one, and then I will have a huge company that sells bread all over the United States. and I became very rich doing that, and by doing that. And so the question is, would it have been better for me not to start this, company only because now I'm extremely rich compared to most people? The answer is, of course not, because I created a lot of wealth. I have lots of employees who didn't have a job, and now they are working and making a living for themselves and their families. People are buying good bread. My bread is better quality, and it costs less, so people have more disposable income to spend in different and other things. And I'm even paying taxes. So I don't know in what head and what brain the idea can come up that it is wrong to have very rich people. Very rich people only exist in successful societies. If you go to Haiti, there is no one rich there. If you go to Cuba, the only guys who are rich are the members of the Communist Party who control the island, the same in North Korea. But if you go to societies where you have certain degrees of freedom, you find lots of rich people because they have been able to develop their skills and their talents, and then they have created a lot of wealth for other people. And the same is with Elon Musk. I mean, the guy is a genius, and he has created so many good things for humanity. And actually, there are studies showing that these billionaires have created, if you take into account the amount of wealth that they have, which, by the way, is invested in factories and things. It's not like they have the cash under the mattress. It's only 2% compared to the wealth that they have created for others. So the same with Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Like, imagine if we didn't have computers. Like, computers helped us all to improve our productivity. So this is the same example of the farmer and the tractor. Imagine a farmer before the tractor trying to, to have wheat and whatever to these crops. Well, he was much less productive. And then with a tractor, suddenly, and fertilizers and things like that, he can produce 50 times more wheat than he used to produce. It means he's going to be much richer, of course. It means that the guy who invented the tractor and is selling the tractors is going to become also very wealthy, and more than the farmer. But it also means that we will all be able to buy bread paying much lower prices because you will have more wheat in order to make them. And so everyone benefits in the market economy. And this is why you see plummeting rates of poverty all over the world when you have market institutions. Even if you open limited spaces for freedom, like China did, or India, or you see it in Latin America, we have many problems. The minute you have a certain amount of rule of law and freedom to trade and engage in market activities, the economy starts growing, people find jobs, you have prosperity, you have lower poverty rates, and so on and so forth. And when you go back, like in Venezuela, you have 92% of people living under the poverty line. That's now the case in Venezuela, 92%. And it was the most prosperous country in Latin America in the 70s. And so, I stick with this Chinese guy who said it best. If you try to prevent some people from being wealthy, you are going to condemn everyone to be poor. And this is what we have to learn. And the other thing is pure envy, in my opinion. It has nothing to do with trying to help anyone. It has to do with equality for the sake of equality, because we hate that people have more than others. And we are socialists, so we want everyone to be equal, but not ourselves. We are going to be not as equal as the rest of the people.
Once again, the title of the book is The Street Economist, 15 Economic Lessons Everyone Should Know by Axel Kaiser. Axel, I think it's fair to say that this conversation that we've had today and the lessons that you've taught us here today are indicative of the lessons that are taught in the book and the method with which these lessons are taught. Simple, straightforward language that anybody can understand. So if you haven't been a fan of economic textbooks in the past, and you could probably put me in that group, this is a very enjoyable read. It's a great book. Congratulations. I can see why it's a bestseller in so many countries. Tell us the countries where it has been a bestseller so far.
Well, it has been a bestseller, of course, in Chile, in Argentina, in Spain. It has done very well in Brazil, in Germany. It's now coming out in Poland, also in Mongolia.
Wow.
That's funny. Yeah, but there are people interested in Russia and Holland and other countries. So I think it's going to be in more than 10 languages by the end of next year, because everywhere people were lacking this very simple way to approach economics, and people have been fascinated by the book, and as a very excessive way so everyone can understand it.
We're talking
I'm very
less,
happy with the result.
and you should be, less than 100 pages, written so that any layperson can understand it. I would say if you've ever wondered how economics really works, but you didn't want to grab a college textbook, this is the book for you. I assume it's available wherever good books are sold, Amazon, Barnes & Noble.
Yes, it's on Amazon, also on the website of Republic Books, which is the publisher.
Mm-hmm.
It's also available, but it is on Amazon and Barnes & Nobles, also the Kindle edition, but I think the printed version edition is on Amazon for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to encourage everybody to buy a copy of that book and read it, because it certainly is going to leave the reader equipped to shoot down a lot of these left-wing ideas the next time you find yourself in a debate with a socialist or, dare I say, a communist. Once again, Axel, the hour went by extremely fast. It was originally only booked for 30 minutes, and I got to tell you, I only got halfway through my questions. so we're gonna have to have you back sometime, because I want to get into.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, I want to get into this thing.
I'd love that.
Yeah, these why the youth are so big on socialism, and a lot of other things that you touched on in the book that we just didn't have the time to get to today. So once again, congratulations on your new book. Best of luck on your American sales. It has been an absolute joy to have you here today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very, very intriguing information presented in such a interesting way. I think anybody out there who's listening should grab a copy of this book and read it. So anyway, thanks, Axel. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Tea Party Power Hour with Mark Gillar.
We all know a guy who only occasionally shaves for big occasions, and it's because that occasional shave really hurts. It's the time of year for big occasions, and yet there he is, suffering with that cheap drugstore razor. Let's help him out. Henson Shaving's line of razors, built with aerospace precision, deliver a smooth shave your dad, brother, and even son can enjoy, eventually. With replacement blades just 10 cents each, you'll buy it once and they'll use it for life. How's that for the perfect gift? Celebrate with 100 free blades on your first purchase, and no subscription headaches. HensonShaving.com/holiday.
Monetizing digital services since 2004. Boosting the entertainment industry by making digital content accessible for everyone. AWG. Where innovation meets monetization.